Good afternoon. Sarah with the Lincoln Lancaster Human Services Department.
Jeff Wymeister, Lincoln Police Department.
Bruce Prenda, Chief Deputy of the Juvenile Division of the County Attorney's Office.
Russ Ewing, Director of Student Services for Lincoln Public Schools.
And I asked to be on the agenda this afternoon because last year you allowed us to make some major changes to how we handle juvenile cases, specifically that in the diversion area and in the prosecution area. And so as a way to be accountable and transparent, I thought it would be good to bring back the results of what we've been able to do in this last year so you could see what the decision that you made was accurate and fruitful. So with that, do you want to?
Ready? We can get started. Thanks again for having us. I'll go through this slide presentation. I'll do some slides and let Chief Blymeister and Russ go through some, and Sarah will go through some. First, it shows juvenile interventions. This is kind of an outline of what we're going to talk about. Juvenile interventions, truancy diversion program, a school-based diversion programs, Restore and SAMI, and then early assessment process, and then basically a summary of juvenile diversion and intensive diversion. If you look at the first slide, what we mean by juvenile interventions is somewhat new for how to handle juvenile violators, kids who have been, and just so that definitions are clear, what we're talking about are kids who commit offenses that would be adult offenses if they were committed by an adult. So these are kids who came into the system through police intervention and then go through the process in our office and ultimately in the court. That would be the normal process that we'd go through. This shows in 2016, we had a number of petitions, just over 800 petitions filed in both the city attorney's office and the county attorney's office. Okay, the lower number there, the blue, is the city cases, number of city cases, and then the red, the county cases. In 2017, through October 10th, we have filed about 500 petitions. And so you know what a petition is. A petition is when a referral comes into our office, juvenile violates the law, let's say shoplifting, contacted by police, they get a piece of paper, it's a referral, and it's similar to a citation that an adult would get. Those come into our office. If we are going to prosecute that referral in court, we would file a petition and say, this juvenile committed shoplifting. So that's a court filing. That's what the petitions are. So you can see from 2016 to 17, quite a few petitions, quite a number of fewer petitions were filed so far this year. And we anticipate that number probably in November and December probably would be about 25 a month or so. So about another 50 petitions to add, so maybe 550 for the total of 2017. So the next question is, why fewer petitions filed? We chose to implement a couple of strategies that managed those referrals coming into our office. The first way we did that is through what Sarah will talk about, the assessment process, where juveniles who have no prior violations, they are assessed at Human Services to receive a score, and she'll talk about what that assessment process is like. Those assessments I review, and if the juvenile scores in a certain range, a range that assesses risk, then we have several options. We can write them a letter, and the letter goes to them and their parents or guardian, and the parent who gets the letter essentially tells them, follow through with whatever consequence you feel is appropriate, and we won't be filing anything at this time. If the juvenile comes back later on, we'll revisit this referral and whatever else we're looking at. But for now, you're not getting any other consequence.
Bruce, I have a
Yeah.
question, sorry. You're saying that this assessment process is only for those that have no priors, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
It's essentially before, it's a process for the determination of what is the most appropriate intervention at this time for that juvenile.
Okay.
And I'll talk about the kids who have priors when I talk about the no charges. But for purposes of warning letters, it's kids with no prior involvement in court. And so we, in 2016, had issued about 200 warning letters, I call them. In 2017, we significantly increased that. In fact, doubled, over 400 warning letters issued. And then the final number is no charges. And this goes to your question. When you have a juvenile who is involved in court and petition's been filed, they've been adjudicated, and they're on probation, for example. Kids that are on probation occasionally commit new offenses. When they commit a new offense, we look at that new offense and we try to make a determination of, again, risk, to determine whether or not a new petition should be filed or whether some alternative intervention should be used. The alternative intervention we use frequently this year is to send the reports to the probation officer, the juvenile probation officer, and not to charge that offense. Juvenile probation officer can then impose some sanction on the juvenile as a term or condition of probation and can address that situation rather than filing a new petition, adjudicating another offense, and further involving the juvenile in the system before the court. Now, the offenses for which they would receive this kind of consideration would be things like marijuana possession, infraction level offense. Could be a shoplift, could be giving of false information to officers, could be trespassing, things like that. In 2016, we had just over 500 of those no charges, and then again in 2017, that number is up to over 600 no charges.
Sarah, sorry, can I ask, if you had to sum that slide up like in one snapshot, what would you say this means?
I think that what is happening is we're using research, grounded evidence to make decisions. And by that, we know that of new law violators coming in, we know if we do nothing for low-risk offenders, for juveniles, 70% of them are never going to touch our system again. That's because the police has had contact with them, the parents have held them accountable. 70% will not come back. So working with the county attorney's office, where can we best spend our money that we're getting in as government? And that is on the medium to the high-risk kids. The kids that are identifying in our assessment as having issues that put them at greater risk for coming back into our system. And so that's how I would answer what this slide is showing, is that decisions are now being based on what we know to be true for research. Does that?
Yeah, we do, for every kid that comes through, we assess the risk, we decide upon the need, and then we develop a response that's appropriate for that need. The assessment process is critical in that whole decision-making process because the assessment is a meeting with the juvenile and the parents, and they go through and see what consequences have been imposed so far. They summarize things, even if it's an assault, for example, and the assault occurred and it resulted in a suspension at school, or it resulted in getting treatment through a counselor or something like that. All of those things are written in that assessment document, and then they come up with a score a number score that assesses risk. Low risk, moderate risk, high risk. If they're in that low risk category, it goes to what Sarah mentioned, that the research suggests that the more you do for low risk offenders, the worse you're making it. The less you do for low risk offenders, the more likely it is they will stay out of the system. And so if you remain true to that research, then this is the result. And at least that's what we're finding over the past year. The next slide is truancy diversion, and we have had truancy diversion in schools for about, 7 years, Russ?
Started in 2010, at 1 year, 1 school, Park Middle School.
300 participants, it says it right there, since 2010, about 50 students per year. We have been, and now we're in 3 middle schools, Color, Goodrich, and Park. And we are in 4 high schools, Southeast, Northeast, North Star, and Lincoln High. There is now minimal enrollment in our middle schools, fewer students enrolled in truancy diversion in middle school, which is important to note because that means middle school students are in school and fewer kids absent from middle school. The high schools is where we really have the majority of our enrollment in the program. 39 active students. We're currently undergoing an evaluation through UNL. It's proven to be a decrease in court-involved truancy cases. And by that I mean, just to give you a background, I don't know how much you know about the truancy diversion program itself, but I talked about petitions filed. The way our program works is it's not a true diversion program, it's kind of a quasi-diversion court program. And we file a truancy petition in court. So once LPS sends us a sufficient documentation to file a truancy case, then we file the petition. When they go to court, we have a meeting with parents and the student, and we offer them the opportunity to take care of the truancy problem in the school. And if they agree to manage it in the school, then I go to, what do I say now, 5 of the schools, and Judge Ryder goes to 2 of the schools. When we go in the schools, we go in once a month, meet with the student and the parents, go through their attendance, go through their grades, and we also, through Human Services, offer them services through Omni, behavioral health. So they have to participate in those 3 things: attend school, have passing grades, and cooperate with the Omni services. If they do those 3 things, and they do it for a semester, and they're successful, then we dismiss their petition, and the record is sealed, and they're done. No use of court resources, no use of probation resources, and the benefit obviously is a sooner resolution to the truancy problem.
What's the definition of truancy?
Truancy
I suppose
is,
number of repetitions and so
to
forth.
simplify it, it's 20 days of absence. And if they're 20 days absent and they've gone through with the school and had a collaborative plan, it's called. So after 10 days, the school gets together with the family. They put together a collaborative plan to correct the attendance problem. If they still reach 20 after the plan, those are cases that can be referred to the county attorney for filing.
Just so we know, we're halfway through with our time.
Okay? Restore. Chief Flymeister will talk about that.
Project Restore, partnership between Lincoln Public Schools, Lancaster County Attorney's Office, Lincoln Police Department, and Human Services. In essence, trying to prevent a deeper dive of individuals on certain offenses, assault and disturbing the peace, that occurs from 7th grade through 10th grade on campus at one of the Lincoln Public Schools. Trying to prevent them from taking a deeper dive. There are So we make the referral, there's criteria. It can't be a aggravated assault causing serious bodily injury, some type of sexual component, gang related. Those make those things ineligible. There's prior offenses that make it ineligible. But then the referral's made to the county attorney's office. They in turn immediately, within a day, turn it over to Human Services, who through restorative justice practices try to educate and hold accountable the kids for what they've done, but yet not allow them to deeper into the criminal justice system. I think the numbers that I have, it started in 2015, about 163 people have been eligible, and then Sarah has compiled some of the other information that is up there for you. Originally, one of the designs is to try to prevent disparate impact, and they had to adjust because it wasn't meeting those particular criteria by lowering the age because of previously existing criminal offenses. But we're excited about it and continue to be a partner.
And LPD was showcased at a national conference for the Restore program.
In Baltimore, Maryland.
So the next one is what we refer to as SAMI, school-based alcohol and marijuana intervention. This is very new. It's less than, we've started it less than a month ago. It is for students that would have been referred to the county attorney for alcohol or marijuana possession in the schools. And so the way that it looks really is there's three pieces to successful completion of it. One of them is an online drug alcohol class that is through what's called Third Millennium classes. It's about a 3.5 to 4 hour online class that takes a look at their own personal use. It does some education around what the use of marijuana or alcohol can do long-term, physically, mentally, etc. And then through that at the end provides them a little, some feedback as well. The other part of it is that the student and the parent agree to go through a SCIP evaluation. SCIP is a partnership that we have in all of our middle schools and high schools and about a third of our elementary schools, which is through a partnership with Lincoln Public Schools and the Lincoln Medical Educational Partnership that provides mental health and drug and alcohol interventions and resources. So they get the eval, and then the third part of it is then a meeting with school staff, the student and the parent on information from the class and the evaluation as kind of a return to school meeting. So what they, schools report those that they have done, but that's really a key piece of that puzzle because that is where they're able to have some kind of hard conversations with the parent and the student related to their drug and alcohol use. It's pretty immediate. We reduce what would typically be a 5-day referral, and referral to student services may only be a much shorter term suspension, and then the class and the SCIP assessment.
Here's Bert.
Oh, just a question. So typically, if a student is caught with drugs or alcohol, their suspension can vary from, or is it typically a 5-day? But if they work with the SCIP program, and they could be back in class
So
sooner.
if they go through this program, what becomes a 5-day suspension referral to student services may become only, say, a 1 or 2 day suspension, and then their next day back, they would be in a classroom taking that online class. And within that time, also doing the SCIP assessment.
Early assessment, Bruce had alluded to this before. Basically, early assessment is for first-time law violators. These numbers reflect who was in our office for the last fiscal year. We have a master level counselor that completes the assessments with the youth. The assessments come from a validated screening assessment. It's called the Nebraska Youth Screen. And so the employee that I have in my office interviews the youth separately and then the family, and then there's a score that coincides with the answers that they may give. A part of this too is she's finding out, has the youth been held accountable at home? Because we know that oftentimes there's different things within a family that have far more stretching concerns for the youth than anything that our system can do. And so then the assessment specialist will type up a report, send it on to Bruce, put the score in there, and then provide a recommendation. And in that, I mean, if we're talking about a youth that maybe had a shoplifting come through and parent has acknowledged that, yes, youth was grounded for a month and I took the cell phone, I paid shop go back, and they wrote an apology letter, what else can we as a system possibly do to this youth? And so we'll send that on to Bruce, and Bruce makes a decision as to what the outcome of the case will be. And if you look and you see those that have gone through assessment, a large number of them come back to diversion or are no charged by the county attorney's office. Moving on then to juvenile diversion and intensive diversion. Like I mentioned at the beginning, over the course of this last year, we've restructured our diversion program. We talked with parents and youth who had their kids in diversion a couple of years ago and got input from them on what worked and what didn't work. And one of the things we heard back was our fee was too much. It was $120 for basic diversion. That was expensive for kids. And so we reduced that. It's now $60, and it's $60 because that's how much our online curriculum is that we're using. That's the third millennium class. The other thing we did was, although we have the case managers in the Human Services office, everything is outsourced. All we do is keep track of the case. So we're working with nonprofit agencies and people in the community to actually provide services to the youth. And what we did too was, instead of, there's a lot of people that usually are at our door saying we can do this, we can do that, but we kind of switched things around with this where we went to where the kids were. And so for example, I know that there's an agency in Lincoln that's providing a lot of services to kids. And kids like going there. And it's a place that we wanted to make sure that when because we're only going to be in the lives of these families for short term. And so we want them to be connected to a place in their neighborhood that they're going to stay with. And so it has to be a place that the kid wants to go to and that they like to go through. So we went and knocked on doors, and we went back and knocked on doors again and said, what can we do? Kids like you. How can we work with you and build some kind of cognitive programming into to make it work for our diversion youth? And so we had about 6 new places come on board. The kids, when they get off diversion, families are saying, can we stay there? How can this work? And we're saying absolutely, and you know what? We will help partner to make sure that you stay there with your family. We're also new that diversion should not be a year. These are kids, get them in, get them out. And so 3 months is what we're usually seeing as the max for kids on diversion. The other thing that we saw was the amount of time it was taking kids coming into our diversion program. We knew from Restore that if we can do this in a day for kids, trying to get them back into school, then we shouldn't be taking 2.5 months with regular diversion to get them in. Because we know that for kids, if you go longer than a couple weeks and then come back and try to punish them, it's not, or hold them accountable, it's not effective. That is not an effective model. And so now how we're getting a hold of kids is we're texting kids, parents, not kids. We're texting them. We're staff are going to schools to find them, to sign them up, and I'll talk here in a minute about our enrollment rate. But you can see there the number of days from the time we actually get the ticket to the time that a case plan is signed with the family has gone from 73 to 2 weeks. The other thing that we changed was something that is kind of a standard across the state are these cognitive-based classes where kids have to come in, they have to do classes, they're usually weekly, and what was happening, what parents were telling us was, I have my kid already in this activity, and this group that you want them to do is conflicting with this pro-social activity that I have my child in. And so kids were being pulled out of pro-social things to go to groups. The second component we found out was what happens in a group with a bunch of kids who are there for an MIP or for a drug offense. They start talking about the thing that they have in common. And then that leads to bigger and other things that come their way. So we said, we don't want to do this with our kids. We want to find an evidence-based curriculum that's online that they can do in their home. They can do it in the library. And if you do it in the library, by the way, here's other resources, and I will hurry through the rest of this. So if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them afterwards. Overall enrollment, again, different way of communicating, of getting out there, went from 50% to 96% of those coming across our desk. Minority enrollment was pretty significant for us. It was at 39% of minorities that were eligible were actually enrolling. We partnered again with Lincoln Public Schools, with their cultural liaisons, and said, hey, we know that some of our immigrant and refugee families don't understand diversion. They don't understand what this letter means that they're getting in the mail. Can you work with us and help us explain what diversion is and help them get them enrolled in our program? Days, I already talked about this. And then our successful discharges have increased by over 10%, or higher than the national average, or
Yes,
Nebraska average, I'm sorry.
And you define a successful discharge is one that does not,
One that's not sent back to the county attorney for a petition.
okay.
And then unsuccessful discharges have decreased. And I should mention too, before a youth is sent back to the county attorney's office, they have to meet with the supervisor in my office to make sure we've explored all options to try to work with the family and the youth.
Summary. Again, the numbers, no charges, petitions, letters, and the diversion number. You'll see the number of kids in diversion went down, and you might wonder if that's a good thing. Diversion is now pointed toward kids who specifically need the diversion service. The increase in warning letters, specifically the increase in warning letters is the reason that there's a decrease in diversion. Because traditionally, some of those kids that got warning letters, first-time offenders, would have been put into the diversion system. And so for that reason, diversion numbers down, warning letters are up, no charges are up, and petitions are down. Shields Unite.
One other facet, another partnership with Human Services and the Lincoln Police Department at the Salvation Army. This will be the second year. It's just about ready to get geared up again with Mr. Bradley at the Salvation Army. Many of you probably know him. It's going to be the same three officers, Officer Morrow, Chastity Jackson, and Tim Cronin. Basically, it is a leadership club. It's an opportunity for our officers to interact with these kids in a non-enforcement setting, build relationships, show them the human side, and hopefully establish positive behaviors that will prevent diversion from even being needed.
And I guess I would just conclude that there's been a lot of change, and none of it would be possible without everybody here at this table, plus a lot of community partners that we have that are supporting our initiative. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Council members have questions, they will get to you later.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for